Welcome back to your source for Grand Power videos in the English language, GBGuns. I am a avid fan and admitted fanboy, but for good reason on these guns. And I'm sure some of you had wondered what happens if you took the coolness of the K100X trim, the semi-race version of my carry gun, the K100, but wanted to see it in something a little more carry sizable, the P1. This is a decocker model. Love this gun. Just a slightly shorter barrel than the K100, but otherwise pretty much the same gun. Well, if you combine those two, you get the P1 Ultra. That's what we'll be taking a look at next. Tabletop review and field strip on GBGuns. If you'd like more information on these or any of the Grand Powers, I have a guide that I have put together rather painstakingly over on gbgunsdepot.com. that lines out all of them, our thoughts and experiences with them, and links on as to where to find them. Looking in the case, we've got the gun bubble wrapped and greased. 3 magazines, there's 1 in the gun, 2 more here. 3 additional back straps for a total of 4. I've done videos in the past on how each of these changes the shape and feel in the hand because they do affect the sides and back, angle side. However, YouTube now thinks that that is gunsmithing, so I can't show you anymore, unfortunately, but those videos do still exist if you take a look through our Grand Power playlist. Up top in the case, on the back side, we've got an Allen wrench for adjusting our sight, a bore brush, and our manual. I like to look at the manual because, well, it gives us an idea of how well the company wants you to understand the gun. Coming into our manual, and you can see the same manual applies to all of these models because they are all very similar. We have our warranty guarantee in multiple languages. That's because Grand Power is based out of Slovakia. And in it, you can find some great information and full color photos. There's their specs. If you want to pause there to see the different models. And basic tips, including full color images on how to field strip the thing, because it is a little bit different. Some people find it hard, but it's just something you learn. And then once you learn it, it's not that big of a deal. So not too worried about it. To get this out of the way, and let's take a look at that gun. Start things off, of course, by showing clear. Take the hand back, make it easier. Look to the rear, and you can see we're empty. Magazine release, as well as all controls, are ambidextrous on all 19 of the Grand Power models that I've ever reviewed. Everything is on both sides. Magazine release gives us a little bit of kick, kicks it out. These are the same 15 round Grand Power magazines that are used in the K100, Q100, the Excalibur. All of your 15 round 9mm Grand Powers use the same magazine, which is great. I've run these mags through front sights desert dustiness, and I've run it through sleet and snow at Thunder Ranch and never had an issue with it. Starting off at the front of the gun, see we've got a rather flush fit barrel, great for carry, nice and low profile, not going to snag on things on the way in or out of the holster. Side to frame fit is very tight, nothing moving much at all. We've got a single slot for an accessory and some front serrations to be able to run. And as I do that, you might be noticing that the barrel is not tilting at all. That's because Grand Power uses a different mode of operation. The barrel rotates instead of tilts. It's pretty cool. More on that as we get into the gun. We've got serrations on the front of the trigger guard, as well as a little hook for those that like to have a finger up front there. A little bit of a relief underneath the trigger guard for the knuckle. I found these things to be very comfortable. It's part of why I've been carrying a K100 for many years now. Our front strap serrations are horizontal, as they should be, because recoil makes the gun want to tilt. And then we've got contours on this that all just kind of fit the hand. The thumb or the flesh has a nice place to go. Easy access to controls. And some slight texturing here. The texture is more visual than it is tactile. It's really not providing much. The guns can get a little bit slick, but it's a lot easier to add texture than to remove it. Backstrap removal, as I said earlier, I can't show you thanks to YouTube's new rules. However, all you gotta do is pry in here and slide the piece off, slide the other one on to find the one that fits. And I strongly recommend doing that, as changing the way your finger naturally reaches the trigger and your hand reaches controls and index points and things, really can change the way the gun feels in hand. Coming around the back, slide frame, very, very tight, and you can see we have blacked out rear serrated sight and front fiber optic. Coming around the right side of the gun, all of our controls are right there again. First, I'll tell you about that action, explain it a little bit more, then we'll get inside the gun. The ground power action type is different. It's not a Browning action. Some people say it's like a certain Beretta model, however, the inside, as you'll see, is very different. The barrel is going to rotate to lock and unlock. As I push back on the slide, you see it rotating. As I bring it forward, it's rotating back up into place. It's about a quarter turn, maybe a little less. But what I theorize that does, because Grand Powers to me all shoot softer. They shoot half a caliber to a full caliber less in recoil than you expect for the size of the gun. And that is, we don't have the mass of the barrel coming back and down, stopping back, stopping down, up and in with each cycling of the gun. And that shift in weight is part of what's going to shift the balance of the gun and felt recoil. With this, that's not happening. It's just a straight back and forth. And I'd argue that's probably what makes the difference. There's plenty of slow-mo videos in our Ground Power playlist of these things in action, so you can see how flat they shoot for me, including when I went to Ground Power and visited them in Slovakia and shot some real 124 NATO loads. The gun was still very controllable. Kind of a neat thing. Now we'll field strip the gun. Getting these apart, as I said, is different but not impossible. It just requires some learning. We've got to pull down on the takedown tabs on both sides of the gun and bring the slide all the way to the rear, up a little bit, and ease it forward and off. What I like to do is hook my middle finger in the trigger guard here. Seems unnatural at first, but we've already checked that the gun is clear, so don't worry about it. So you've got something to pull against while pulling down with these two fingers. Starting with the hammer back makes life a whole lot easier because you're not fighting the hammer spring. Bring it, the slide, this one's slick with that factory grease. I'm gonna have to wipe this off. How we do now. Now normally when I do this, and keep in mind the shorter the barrel is, the stronger that spring has to be, so the more you have to fight. That's what makes the XCal and K100 easier to do this on than these subcompact and compact guns. But I typically brace the heel of the gun against my stomach to pull against. I can try to use the table here, it just doesn't look so great on video. So, sorry about that. So we come back, we lift up, and ease it forward. And our slide comes off. Now, the first thing you might notice here is something Grand Power has been doing for decades, but didn't become popular design until somewhat recently, and that is that all of your mechanism, firing mechanism, is sitting inside a billet stainless steel chassis. Now, it's not the serialized part. The frame is still what's serialized on these guns because modularity wasn't a thing when these were first created. However, that keeps all of the pins in place, keeps them from being exposed. Also, as pins try to shift and waller and worry themselves out or into larger holes, they're fighting against stainless steel and billet steel at that versus the polymer of the gun. I think that's a big part of the longevity of Grand Power guns. I also think this chassis is part of what permits such a spectacular trigger. More on the trigger feel later in this video. Another thing you'll notice is we've got initials here, and that's the guy who put this chassis together. Talk about ultimate responsibility. If there's ever a warranty issue and it comes down to construction, right there, they know who put this together. Let's find out what he was doing on that day, why it was able to get out the door without being quite perfect. You can see we've got a nicely polished feed ramp here. It's sitting so low like that because this is one of the few guns where low bore axis is a real thing. You see, since there's no feed ramp on the barrel's just twisting instead of dropping to pick things up. The barrel has to sit lower, and as a result, you can see we're feeding those rounds pretty much right into the barrel, which is pretty neat. Taking our slide, we'll get our barrel out by just making sure it's unlocked, and it rolls out. You can see this beautiful piece. This polished steel part here is what rotates on this roller bearing. You guys can't see it roll because it's so shiny. Looks like it's not moving at all, but this is a roller bearing, and it's one of the spots that I recommend lubricating to help make sure the guns run well. Looking up inside of our slide, you can see that any metal that doesn't need to be there isn't there. There's a lot of extra deep machining here to help reduce reciprocating mass and keep these things feeling smooth. We do have a safety plunger there, however, which is different from, say, the Excalibur, which is a complete race gun. This is more suited to be carryable, but still have some light reduced weight in the slide. We also have an uncaptured recoil spring. That is handy should you ever need to tune it or replace it, color coded, as this is a shorter barrel than the K100, the big brother of this model. Next, we'll take a look at chamber fitment. Chamber fitment, as always, is checked using our Nosler match here. The most precisely machined ammunition I've ever tested, because yes, they make their brass starting with ingots, including their copper and lead, also from ingots. They extrude it, do it all. I've been there and seen it. So we drop this into the chamber. You can see we've got some nice polish around the edge, a little bit of beveling, and a beautiful polish inside there. Graham Power's barrel surface smoothness is better than a third of what's required for a European manufacturer. So just keep that in mind. They make spectacular barrels. Drop this in, listen for a plunk. Make sure it can rotate freely, and it can. And then what we're looking at is how much brass beyond those bends is sticking out. And the answer is pretty much nothing. These are fully supported, which makes sense. So because they're designed around and meant for that CIP European ammunition. Remember, NATO spec is about 10% higher pressure than SAMI spec, which means if it can run NATO ammo, it can run plus P ammunition. This is a barrel short enough that I might consider plus P use in. Now, these guns were previously with a stainless barrel. It was pretty, it was really nice, but as with all stainless, it does rust. So then moving to this surface coating, I think is probably a good idea. I'm going to drop this in, and what I always do is lock it, which you can tell by seeing the serial number through the window, rotate a little bit and let it fall free. And now to get it back on the gun is the reverse of what we did to get it apart. I once again do this by pushing the heel against my stomach and keeping the muzzle somewhat pointed down. I'm going to see if I can just bear this on without worrying about it. And it is not going to do that. I've been told you don't have to pull down on these takedown levers to get it back on. However, I tend to have better luck when I do. For example, there it is back on. Quick functions check. Still slick with that oil. And our double action works. And our safety, of course, still works. Trigger talk. I'm sure you guys are curious. How is it that Graham shoots these things so fast? Well, you're about to see the secret. So it's a single action gun, double action as a backup, but it does not have a decocker, at least not on this model. There's our take up. And that's how light the ball is. You get to the take up and just press a little. Minimal over travel, very crisp break, and our reset right there. And you're at the wall again to fire again. So if you can double click a mouse, you can shoot a Graham Power very quickly. Spectacular triggers. That's why I carry a decocker model. I wish there were more in the States, but it seems that they've kind of dried up. But you do have a manual safety here. You just got to make sure that it stays safe, because this thing is ready to fire as soon as you are. You think about it and it's there. Spectacular, spectacular trigger. A true marksman trigger and a shooter's gun. Part of why I love these things. I would take it from a guy that's reviewed over 400 handguns. I like my Graham Powers for a reason. Anyways, that is the P1 Ultra tabletop review and field strip. When we get this to the range, you're going to see cold shot first impressions from myself and Miss Tia. 2 different shooters, 2 different hand sizes, 2 different general opinions, likes and dislikes. Then we'll do full magazine plus 1, show you how these 15 round mags run, and this gun runs with 16 rounds in the gun. Our trademark What's for Dinner test, running 10 different loads through it to show you what it will eat and what it might not eat. Then we have our 6-inch spinner target for sights and trigger control. We'll shoot some practical accuracy shots from 7 yards, 5 shots, and give you our concluding thoughts. But I'm really looking forward to shooting this We have reviewed this in the past, but our format has changed, our knowledge has advanced. It's time for a full revisit. So that's what you'll see. Thanks for watching.